we're going to sort of transition into our next session, which is going to go from 1:30 to 2 Eastern time. And I stress that because our speakers are coming to us from the University of Saskatchewan in Canada. And their session is titled Intention, Tenacity, and a Bit of Serendipity, How We've Grown Open on the Canadian Prairies. And our two speakers are Heather Ross and Shannon Lucky. Heather Ross is an educational developer in the Gwenwa Moss Center for Teaching and Learning at the University of Saskatchewan, where she leads the university's Open Educational Resources Initiative, advises on course development, and co-leads the institution's Digital Literacy Initiative. She's an OER Research Fellow with the Open Education Group. Shannon Lucky is an assistant librarian in the Library Systems and Information Technology Unit at the University of Saskatchewan Library. Her research focuses on how usable open source technology can make computational methods and tools accessible for everyone. She has a BA in History from the University of Saskatchewan, BFA in Photography from Concordia in Montreal, and is an MLS and MA in Humanities Computing from the University of Alberta. And with that, I think we're a little bit ahead of schedule, but I'm hoping that's okay. So we can move on to our next presentation. Are you guys ready?
Yep.
Okay, so we're going to switch things over to you.
Okay.
Here you go.
Okay. Thank you for joining us today. I'm assuming that Shannon's in the room as well. We're actually in different rooms in the building right now.
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, we're all good.
We're good. We're good. Okay. So we're coming to you from the University of Saskatchewan, which is actually in Saskatoon, and it's sort of above North Dakota and what am I missing, Shannon?
Montana?
Montana, thank you.
Yeah, yes, the other one. Yeah.
The other one. Okay. So the University of Saskatchewan is, as I said, is located in Saskatoon. That's a picture of us in the middle of kind of summertime. Day it's around -30 and covered in snow, but still a great place to be. We have around 17,000 undergraduate students here and about 4,000 graduate students on top of that. We're a medical doctoral university with most of the big professional programs, all the medical dentistry, education, engineering, business, available through our institution. And the institution is about 105 years old, I believe.
Sounds right.
So we have a fair bit of history here. So this is what's been going on with Open at the University of Saskatchewan. This year we have around 4,000 students using Open textbooks in 7 different colleges at the university. We had our first major adoption in January of 2015, which was in our College of Agriculture, and it was for an agricultural economics course, and they used the OpenStax economics textbook for that, just as is. And we've grown since then. So this year we're hitting about $800,000 in savings, and next year we'll cleanly roll over $1 million in savings for our students here just at our university. And we've started moving into open pedagogy as well, having students creating learning resources. In terms of open textbooks, we have 5 that have either new or adaptations that have been completed, and 7 more that are in production here at the university. So I just want to tell a few quick stories about how the culture here has been changing around open textbooks and OER, and some of the things that have happened to help drive that change in culture. So I gave a presentation to a department in our College of Arts and Science, one of the science departments, a few months ago, and they mentioned to me that they had met with their textbook publisher who, when they said the word open in front of, there was clearly a bit of panic, and the publisher and the representative from the publisher said, okay, next year we'll drop the price for the textbook. We can do it by about 50% for your students. How's that? And they said, okay, because they knew they weren't going to be able to make the change that quickly. But it cemented for them how wrong the commercial publishing industry was for textbooks, because if they could drop the price by 50%, that meant the publishers were making quite a profit off of their students. And so that was the final push that made them say, yes, we're going to open. We can't continue this anymore. So that was one thing. The Student Cries with Relief story is also in our sciences. Our geology department professor came to me and said, after she switched to an open textbook, that a student came up to her on the first day of class crying with relief because she was going to have to drop that course if there wasn't an open textbook, because she couldn't figure out how to afford yet another textbook given the prices for them. The final one about students cheering. So one of our earlier large adoptions was in our School of Business. And it's a first-year course that is a required course for all students in that school. That's an introduction to university and an introduction to that program. And the instructors for that course, it's co-taught, it's a large course, it's co-taught by an associate dean and another instructor. And they had, I went to the associate dean, was talking about open textbooks, and she said, hey, do you have one for this course that I teach? And we found the College Success book out of the University of Minnesota program. And they said, well, it's not quite what we need. And I said, oh yeah, but you can modify it and you can do whatever you need to with this book to make it the book that you need. And they were sold right there. And they went to their students on the first day of class, and the adaptation was not done yet. They were going to have to give the students chapters as they were ready because they were doing the adaptation throughout the term. But they said to the students on the first day of class, we made a deal with the publisher where they would bring it down to $75, and we decided the book still wasn't good enough and that price still wasn't good enough. So we're doing an open textbook for you instead, and you're just going to have to be kind of patient as we get the adaptation out to you. And the entire class cheered. And I tell that story every time I give a talk on open at our institution, because it's a fabulous way of building rapport with your students. If on the first day of class you say, we've decided instead of you having to spend this much money for a book that's not quite right, we're going to go with an open textbook that we are making the book that you need. And having that in your syllabus and just telling your students on the first day of class is a really great way of building rapport. So this is how we've done it at our institution. And I'll be honest, and I say this whenever I give a talk, I make a real pain of myself. Every time I talk to somebody, I talk about open. And some people see me coming, and I see that sort of look on their face as, oh no, here she comes again. But I give workshops throughout the institution. I do one-on-one consultations. If somebody has come to me about open specifically, absolutely, I'm talking about all the different options. But if I have a meeting with somebody to talk about their syllabus, or they have questions about assessment, because I do work with people on course development, I try and get in conversations around open educational resources and open pedagogy. I've presented at a couple of department meetings, and I try and make my presence known enough to the right people in departments that I can get my invitations there. We have had some funding, limited funding through our provincial government, which would be like a state government, to help fund adaptations and a few small creations. The institution as well has kicked in terms of in-kind funding from our distance education unit, who works with people on building the books or doing adaptations in press books. Lots of units on campus provide support around this initiative, and it's all just part of our job. So it's considered in-kind funding. Professors who are working on this do not get paid directly for this. We have funding for their graduate students or for sessionals, for adjunct professors, to cover courses or maybe to do some of the work on the open textbooks. And so if an instructor's putting a lot of time in, that's an in-kind as well. When we have food at workshops, we get a lot of people. So food always seems to work. Student advocacy, I know a lot of institutions are doing textbook broke campaigns where students are talking about how much their books are costing and really trying to guilt instructors into making the change. I've worked with our undergraduate student union here to really do a celebration of instructors who are using open. which seems to be going over pretty well. That first major adoption we had 2 years ago, they gave that professor an award for innovation in teaching from the undergraduate students, and I think that meant a lot to him. This is, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the work coming out of BC campus, but Mary Burgess and Amanda Coolidge out there frequently talk about meeting instructors where they're at. So have resources for them. The textbook reps come to them and they are buying them lunch, and they've got the free copy of the book, and they've got all these ancillary resources. But being able to know where to find what they might be looking for and get them an answer pretty quick seems to be quite effective. They know that I'm responsive. Our librarians are incredibly responsive to them as well. Do your homework. I work in our teaching and learning center, and if I have a meeting with somebody who I'm not very familiar with around this, I'll go and talk to my colleagues to find out a little bit about departmental politics, about what they know about those instructors in particular, what changes are going on in the department, so that I go in and I know a lot more than a textbook rep would know. I really listen to their needs, about what they're saying, and yes, I understand you time is tight and you don't have time to necessarily do an adaptation, but how about trying it out this term and see what changes you'd need to make, and then we can work on the adaptation at a later time. I had somebody from our College of Education make the comment that I was the textbook rep that they wanted to see in their doorway, because I wasn't coming and trying to sell them something that their students would have to pay a lot for. But also when I come to them with a new resource, I can work with them on the pedagogical side on how to integrate that into their courses. So having that support is important. And finally, we have a Starbucks in our library here, and it's just downstairs from Shannon's office and across the way from where I work. And I get up and I do regular walks around the library, I go around the university, and I get out of my office and really try and meet up with people just where they happen to be, and strike up conversations. Hey, are you still teaching that first year psychology course, or what's going on in math, or anything like that? It's helping to make serendipity possible. If I just stay in my office, it doesn't happen. But I found that when I get out and really go and find people where they're at, that seems to be reaching them and reminding them of possibilities. And I'm going to hand this over to Shannon now.
Great. Thanks, Heather. Yeah, well, like Heather said, I am one of those people that Heather ran into in a hallway somewhere, and managed to rope me into this growing army of people who are working on supporting OER on our campus. And as in the introduction mentioned, I'm a librarian who works in our systems department, so I'm not somebody whose face you'll see out in the university very much. I don't do any instruction sessions, but I am the person whose signature you'll see in your inbox a lot. So I do a lot of communications on behalf of the library systems department, our web teams and things like that. So in some ways, I'm a bit of an unusual ally in this program to support OER at the U of S. But in other ways, it kind of makes a lot of sense. And that's what I'm going to sort of focus on in my kind of take from a systems perspective on how our library can support OER growth on the U of S campus. So as Heather sort of gave the kind of the timeline on how OER got started here, the library was really a bit of a later addition to the group of OER proponents here at our university. And our support has grown in the sort of grassroots way, sort of, again, that serendipitous, you see little projects and you see opportunities to sneak it in with the work we're already doing, that really mirrors the work Heather already discussed on the university level. So there are really multiple ways that the library as an institution here, and also our individual librarians and our frontline library staff on the ref desks, can support OER on our campus. So I'm going to talk a bit about some of the major areas and related projects we're currently working on, and then I'm going to conclude with some of my perspective on areas for future growth for us. Next slide. Oh, thanks. Right. So one of the biggest things from my perspective anyway that the library can bring is infrastructure. One of the biggest challenges for OER adoption and sustained use is really having that technical and also the operational infrastructure for storing things, managing multiple versions, remixes, combinations of OER, preserving these versions and making them accessible to students and to faculty in a way that makes sense to them where they're already looking for information. And this is going to be a callback to many of the other presentations we've already heard today, put stuff where people are already looking. Luckily, that is literally what the library does. We exist here on our campus to help connect people to the resources they need, and then to keep information safe and accessible over the long term. So we can bring our expertise in search and discovery, recommending resources, metadata and indexing, digital preservation and data storage, copyright, and user behavior all together to the challenges that face the widespread OER adoption on our campus. The library can also leverage the reputation we have as a place to access free resources on campus already, and as information literacy experts. So we can take these things that we're already good at and sort of extend them into the areas of OER, or sort of bring OER into the practices we're already doing. One local example is at the U of S in our systems department. We have developed a pretty sophisticated technical infrastructure that combines a bunch of different systems, a lot of them open access or open source technology, things like Islandora. We have an eCommons repository. We use Archivematica, Drupal, and also integrations with our Primo discovery layer. We combine all of these systems to preserve and provide access to our digital resources. So while this whole system that we've set up was never specifically designed for OER, all of these systems can be adapted to include OER in various formats with the goal of getting open resources where people are searching, and then to integrate it with the rest of our collections and our supports for teaching and learning. Next slide. So right here, you'll see a screenshot, which is one example of a collection of images created by Dr. Angela Kalinowski from our history department. We worked with her to input her extensive collection of her own photographs that she took during her research travels into our Islandora digital management system, or digital asset management system, and to create metadata to make this collection searchable and to set up a basic website that anyone can access. Dr. Kalinowski uses this online collection in her teaching, but it's also open and online for anybody to see. Oops. I'm going to try and copy and paste these links in while we're talking here into the chat so you guys can follow along. There it is, ancientsportandspectacle.usask.ca. There we go. So typically creating a digital resource like this is a pretty substantial amount of work. It takes a lot of time, but because we were able to tweak the tools that we already had and systems that we'd already set up for different reasons, we were able to provide access to the technical systems. And you can see this website it's not sort of stylized or styled up, and it probably could be a lot nicer to look at. But we were able to set her up with a bunch of her research assistants, do some training on metadata creation and using the tools, and they were able to get this resource up and running for her students in a matter of months rather than like the way academia can sometimes work a matter of years. So this was sort of one of our big wins, and this is a process that we're looking on continuing to be able to develop and make available to more and more professors. If they've got stuff sitting on their hard drives or sitting in their desk drawers that they think, I'd love to use this in my teaching, but it's like, how do I do that? Or I'd love to make this accessible. This is one way we can do it. And just one of the requirements when we do something like this is to say, we'll help you put this online and make it accessible for your students, but we also want to make it accessible for other students as well. So to put it out there for everyone to use. Other efforts that involve sort of teaching and learning on our campus focus on that social infrastructure that Heather talked a bit more about, and the library can be a major player in just because we have librarians embedded in all of our colleges and departments. So subject librarians can connect with professors to offer education and help, again, integrating the use of OER in the classroom and as part of their pedagogy. One example is Dee Dee Dawson, our science librarian, and an amazing proponent for open publishing, open educational resources, just that sort of culture of open, recommended an open textbook option to one of our profs in chemistry as an option for his classes. And now he's using that in his courses and has, in return, become an advocate for OER within his college. So it is sort of those sort of like fingers of knowledge going out into the world where we can manage to make impacts on that person-to-person level. And in a campus community, that can happen really quickly. Next slide, please. So the next slide is looking at publishing, open publishing on campus. So unlike some other universities, we don't have a university press or formal publishing program housed here in our library, but we do provide support for online publishing using open journal systems, or OJS, which is used to host our U of S undergraduate research journal, or the USurge. And I'm going to throw that link in there as well. And there we go. USurge is a faculty-reviewed journal that publishes the original work of U of S undergraduate students. So while not strictly an OER, the capacity to support open publishing and to particularly to share student research and student work is an initiative that we see as a natural extension to supporting OER and a larger culture of open on our campus. Additionally, our copyright office is located now in the library. It recently moved here last year. So we have the capacity to be able to provide a lot more support for people who are publishing, to help them publish in openly accessible areas, or to make work that they've already published open in other ways. And I just added a link in. This is amazing timing. They just launched their new alpha version of their website this week, and they have a whole page of resources for open educational resources use on campus. So I'll throw that in there as well. Next slide, please. Sort of linked to the open publishing is the idea of open repositories for open access materials, and our institutional repository here at the U of S. So the library provides IR systems and support to host open access articles, preprints, conference presentations. I'll throw these slides in here when we're done today, posters, electronic theses and dissertations, and really any other pieces of scholarly output where there's an original work that we can put into the repository. So these are major contributions to supporting open research on our campus, and an area we are actively growing right now. Previously, our eCommons website is not as up and running, but it had only been used for ETDs, electronic theses and dissertations, and research that was done by our faculty librarians in the library. But we are working actively with campus partners to massively scale up this service to a campus-wide level to support researchers in all of our colleges and departments to make their work open and accessible. So you're getting the world premiere first view of what the new interface is going to look like for our new IR, which we're branding as Harvest, the research archive for the U of S. It isn't launched yet, but keep an eye on that URL that I just put into the chat, and we are anticipating a launch later this year. It'll have a new URL, but we'll set that one up to redirect. Great, next slide. So finally, I just wanted to wrap up with a few areas for future expansion and future opportunities. Everything I've talked about today are really just starts in systematically integrating OER into our library culture, and there are lots of areas where we could continue to grow. One example is open textbooks, and this has been talked about a lot today this morning and in the presentation just before us. To think about adding open textbooks to our library catalog, to host or have links within all of our discovery systems, and to also have print copies available in our library on the shelves on reserve. We also want to think about walking the talk in our in-house created resources. Our instructional librarians make lots of original resources to help people understand how to use the library and promote information literacy. So we want to make sure we release digital and print resources with Creative Commons licenses so other people can use them as well. This goes doubly for our development of our library guides. We use the LibGuides system to make sure those resources are open to the public web. We also have talked a bit about, especially with Heather, about the support of the development of Z courses, or I guess the Z courses, through digital course backs, using library reserves, recommending open resources to instructors or library resources we already subscribe to, just generally spreading the word about open or free alternatives to purchasing commercial textbooks. We want to look, and finally, from my perspective, where I sit in the IT department, look for systems that support the use of open resources. One example that we're working to implement right now is the OA-DOI Unpaywall Link Resolver tool, and I'll throw that link in the chat as well. And this is basically a tool. I believe they're using it at at MIT right now, and it's just it plugs into your link resolver and helps connect people who are searching in your systems directly to open versions of resources. So this is still all really in the early days of doing all that we can to support OER on our campus, and much of the work I've described has been done off the side of people's desks as experiments or as passion projects to support something we believe is really beneficial for our community. Scaling up these projects will require more dedicated staff time, probably some specialized training, technical resources, and infrastructure developments. But the groundwork we've done here already has proven that there is a big demand and a growing demand on our campus from students and faculty, and that the library can be a really meaningful partner in contributing to the growth of OER at the U of S. Great. So I want to thank you guys so much for having us here for the conference today, and I think Heather and I are ready to take some questions.
Thank you guys so much. So we have one question so far from Veronica Howard, and she said, what ways and resources can you suggest to help instructors offer Z or Z courses?
Oh, that's great. I don't know if Heather wants to jump in there. I mean, this is one of the things we talked a lot about is what is the definition of a Z or a Z course? And there's some people who will say it has to be zero additional costs other than the cost of the tuition for students. We came down a little bit more, if it costs sort of, was it, Heather, under $50 or under $40?
Oh, it was actually, I think, 35.
Oh, right, because there was that very particular example.
Yeah, and so we said it was zero, and we have a sort of an OER advisory group that the dean of the library is now on, and we came down to $35 or less, so zero or minimal direct costs for students, because if you're using library resources, then there's still indirect costs for students through tuition. But working with instructors to move that way, having the librarians absolutely, and your educational developers, if you have a teaching and learning center, working together to come up with ideas on how to replace existing materials. And that might mean, hey, we found an open textbook for you, or hey, we can make a virtual course pack up using a website through the library, or have students creating resources using open pedagogy, or it might be a combination of all of them. But it kind of goes back to that meeting them where they're at and what their comfort level is and what resources exist for that discipline, for that course. So there isn't, one of the things that I try and stress is there's no one size fits all for every situation. It's really knowing who the instructor is and what the course is and what's available through your institution.
Yeah, I know from sort of the library perspective, in terms of thinking about what resources there are, a lot of it is, just getting creative, thinking about what we have access to through our library. So I often think a really extensive Z course could include things like it might have an open textbook, but you might also have permalinks to digital resources in our catalog, so students can go and download digital online articles that we subscribe to. You might have print books that are on reserve in the library that are on hours to days reserve period. It might be resources that the professor has created themselves, like Dr. Kalinowski's image collections. A lot of it is sort of getting creative and putting together what we've already got in the library to try and find free ways. I would imagine that it's certainly a lot more work for the instructor to sort of piece together a patchwork of resources than assign one big textbook. But I also think it's a good opportunity to sort of reach out to different resources for learning as well.
Great. We have a question from Alexis Clifton. And she wanted to know if there were any particular trends in what department or schools were embracing OER. And she was wondering about the interest level at the graduate level and in the professional programs in particular.
Well, there's a lot there. Our College of Agriculture used to lead on campus because we had that first agricultural economics course, and then that instructor had two smaller courses, so he had adopted open textbooks for those. And then there's a statistics course offered through that college, and students from all over campus take that one because it has a reputation of just being a more understandable course. I'll put it that way. And it's a huge course. And then our College of Arts and Science, which is our largest college on campus, kind of got wind of this. I may have said something to the dean. about it, and arts and science started really kicking in then. School of Business is, in terms of professional programs, has a lot of interest. There's open being used at the undergraduate and graduate level over there. And so it's finding the right instructors. And one of the things that we had actually with the School of Business was an instructor, and we have this in our vet college as well, starting now, is instructors already releasing materials to their students for several years and just convincing them to make that an open textbook. So students at other institutions can benefit from what they were giving to their students already. And so we're seeing that kind of, I guess, sort of in the professional schools, we've seen more of that than we have in some of the undergraduate programs.
Okay, great, thank you. If anybody else has any questions, please feel free to ask away. We'll give people a minute or so to type.
I do want to throw one more thing in.
Sure.
There's an open book coming out that's supposed to be coming out this spring related to open in libraries. And Shannon and I have a chapter in that about what we've done at the U of S that will go into more, I think, more depth than what we were able to do for this presentation. I don't know when it's supposed to be out though. We're just have a chapter.
Sure. We have another question, which actually popped up in the chat box, from April Aikens. I hope I'm saying your name right. I'm sorry if I'm not. I'm looking to do a survey of faculty to find out who's currently using OER and who wants to start using them. Does anybody have any sample questions that might be good for a survey like that? That may actually be a question in general to the attendees.
Yeah.
as I'm reading it and realizing that.
I'm currently doing interview. Actually, I have some this afternoon. I'm interviewing faculty here that are using OER on campus to find out kind of what supports are working for them and what more we need to do to support other instructors at the institution. We've done surveys with students, but we haven't done any broad surveys with faculty.
And I see Alexis just put in the box, because Alexis works for SUNY OER Services, and she has a model for that. So you can feel free to email her to get sort of questions on that. And Rebecca Neal wanted to know what the title of that book was that you had mentioned.
I don't know yet.
Oh,
I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah, actually, Heather, I think I might have it in my email here. I think it's OER, a field guide for academic librarians.
That sounds correct. I can't. Since I'm sharing my screen, I don't want to go searching through all my email.
I'll paste it into the chat. And then,
there was a question. Yes, absolutely. Somebody posted the link to the Open Ed group and the toolkit. That is incredibly valuable stuff in there. You'll find some great things.
Okay, and it looks like we'll get one more question in here from the question box. Veronica Howard wanted to know if there are any other traits that help suggest an instructor is open to using open materials.
See what other innovative stuff they're doing in terms of using learning technologies or active learning, something other than traditional lecture, traditional essays. It comes in handy that I work at the Teaching and Learning Center because I work with faculty on their course design, and so I see how they're teaching and what they're willing to go to, what they're willing to do. But work with your teaching and learning centers because people are really plugged in there. But a lot of librarians will know this as well.
It's a good synergy between the two
Yep.
areas. All right. So thank you guys very much. If anyone else has any questions for Heather and Shannon, you can feel free to contact them. Their information is still up on the screen.